Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather on the 8th day of November, 2020. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting today's show. First on Heather's weather graphic, winter storm warning for heavy snow continues this evening for the Susitna Valley until 6 p.m. this evening. And so heaviest snow has already occurred, and it'll start tapering off. And again, warning will end at 6 p.m., about another couple hours. And also the warning there for the greater Galena area, West Central Ontario, that also ends at 6 p.m. Winter weather advisories, Tanana and down into the areas along and northwest of the Alaska Range Denali Park. That's out until, 9 p.m. this evening, I believe. And then the winter storm warning for the greater Fairbanks area, Eastern Alaska Range, and the 40-mile country, that's out until 6 a.m. The entire night tonight. You could see another 3 to 6 inches of snow there. And Copper River Basin winter weather advisory for snow ends at 9 p.m. this evening. And the southeast coast there, we've got actually a blizzard or a winter storm warning for heavy snow for areas above 500 feet up towards Skagway, mostly along the Klondike Highway. Looking at 6 to 9 inches of snow tonight with gusty winds, but the snowfall levels after midnight rise to about 1,000 feet or more, and it'll continue to warm in toward early morning. Otherwise, moving on, we've got satellite images showing a couple of systems, a stronger one here that brought the 6 to 10 inches of snow across areas of south central Alaska today, with mostly rain falling along the North Gulf Coast areas. Seward picking up about just under an inch of precipitation, while Cordova, Yakutat, picked up about 1 1/4 inches of rain this afternoon. As that rolled up, pretty gusty winds. Arctic Valley had a wind gust to 83 miles per hour overnight last night. They're about 3,600 feet there, but McHugh Creek and Turnaganar, 56 miles an hour is about it. Anyway, those winds have reversed direction now. Now they're picking up down across Kodiak Island, southern Cook Inlet into Kachemak Bay. Homer seeing gusts near 40 miles an hour, while Kodiak State Airport near 50 miles an hour to the northwest, and gusty winds back across Bristol Bay as well, with clearing skies, higher pressure over the eastern Bering Sea there, drying it out along the west coast ahead of the next system front, bringing some rain into the Adak-Atka area, and not quite to the Pribilofs yet. And rolling this through again, you can see most of the moisture up over the interior there, eastern interior, and looks like a little bit of a wave developing there just off the north coast of the Panhandle. And winds kicking up to about 40 to 50 miles an hour this afternoon along the central north coast of the Panhandle, with the rain on the increase there, and will continue here this evening. You can see the heavier rains I mentioned last 12 hours, about 1 1/4 inches falling at Yakutat and Dry Bay, also at Cordova. And southerly flow and milder conditions starting out as snow in Juneau currently here, and definitely far up Lynn Canal started snow and then begin to change over to rain later tonight with a winter storm warning. Otherwise, higher pressure building in out over the eastern Bering Sea, weak low, few snow showers around St. Lawrence Island, and then the high ridge ahead of that frontal system bringing the gusty winds and rain into the western Aleutians. Otherwise, we have a weak trough bringing some skiffs of light snow to the Arctic coast and North Slope. And for tonight, that front will move right into the Panhandle with the heaviest rain, strongest winds occurring during the evening hours. And as it approaches the coast, the gradient kind of stretches out there with something of a wave developing down toward the Queen Charlottes. So winds will diminish toward morning. Rain will become a little less heavy in the south, and then should be just about all rain, even all the way up to Skagway. Kind of the cutoff point there. Could be some freezing rain along the Klondike Highway as well. Go with that winter storm warning. Otherwise, look for periods of snow to continue, with even though advisory ends for the Copper River Basin at 9 p.m. Probably continue some light snow, very light snow till through the night tonight, as well as the eastern interior areas, but beginning to taper off. But the winds dramatically increasing here for Cook Inlet, as they're already doing for both Kachemak and Kamishak Bays, Kodiak Island, and so winds will be starting to come out of the north there for Seward, and could gust as high as 40, maybe 45 miles an hour toward morning. And for Monday, that front pushes strong winds and snow and blowing snow into the Seward Peninsula. St. Lawrence Island, start out as snow, but quickly change over to rain as the southerly flow brings warmer air back in with it. So mixture precipitation here for the southwest interior. And then dry high-pressure ridge shifts over the central interior. Mostly clear skies, and it's about as fast as the winds pick up, they'll drop off here for south-central Alaska, even the eastern North Gulf Coast. That low slides into the central panhandle right around Sitka, somewhere between Port Alexander and Sitka. So the rain-snow line, put it right through the central panhandle, chance of snow showers north of that, and then periods of rain, possibly moderate, maybe heavy at times. That'll mostly the heavier rain will probably be down toward the Queen Charlottes, along with the gustier wind conditions. And the outlook for Tuesday, let me back it up here. You can see a warm front there on the edge of the picture, the original low in the northwest Bering Sea. Well, that troughs out, weakens, and then that system rapidly makes a really good jog to the east-northeast, already the front in 24 hours, right up almost to the southwest coast with gale force winds and warmer temperatures once again moving in, replacing the cooler air that shifts over the southeast coast on Monday night and Tuesday with high pressure over the Yukon. Otherwise, winds increasing, again, possible storm force winds along the Alaska Peninsula. Probably not making it to Kodiak Island, but milder conditions moving northward over the western interior again with gusty winds out over the Aleutians, widespread area of rain and showers with looks like gale force winds across much of the southeast Bering Sea, even behind the front. Otherwise, partly mostly sunny conditions southeast interior with light winds in the panhandle. Lows tonight, single numbers in teens, followed by highs jumped to Tuesday afternoon in the 20s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First flying weather graphic Monday morning, a lot of IFR from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast across the North Slope, and a band of IFR with the frontal system pushing in toward the central Bering Sea. So ADAC, IFR on up to St. Matthew Island. Otherwise, the Pribilofs, Atka Island, St. Lawrence Island, southwest coast, the Bering Strait coast, Seward Peninsula, all marginal VFR, some IFR over the inland areas of the Yukon and Kuskokwim River Delta areas. IFR still pretty well entrenched along the western Alaska Range, and even more so up over the central and eastern interior, upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, down to about the Alaska Range. And then some IFR to start there for Turnagain Arm, across the Chugach National Park area, on up into Butte, Palmer, Chickaloon possibly, and then for Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast into the Wrangles, IFR, all the Panhandle IFR. But by the afternoon, the IFR pretty much is off into Canada, so that'll be followed by marginal VFR for the entire southeast coast back to about Yakutat. But notice the VFR, eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, most of Bristol Bay, Kodiak VFR, south central Alaska, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, and most of the Copper River Basin VFR, and that swath extends northwestward right up to the Noatak Valley and Cape Lisburne, Point Hope, Kivalina, all VFR, including Red Dog. VFR also for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, IFR up into the northern Bering Sea, Yukon Delta down to about the Kuskokwim River there in the Delta, Nunivak Island, and some IFR for Atka, otherwise improving out over the western and southwest Bering Sea. For Tuesday morning, holds IFR, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, and south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, all the Panhandle now VFR up the east side. Some marginal VFR there, roughly just north of Eagle on up toward Arctic Village. Otherwise VFR central and eastern North Slope and Arctic coast. IFR pushing inland but breaking up some, but into the Koyukuk, Kobuk valleys back to the northwest coast. IFR coming across the Kuskokwim Valley, starting to spill into Cook Inlet a little bit. Marginal VFR has a better chance of getting into the far western Cook Inlet area. Otherwise, IFR Pribilofs down to the eastern Aleutians, along and south of the Alaska Peninsula to Atka. And for the afternoon, holding VFR for the southeast coast, but deteriorating conditions south central Alaska now. Marginal VFR up to the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, southern Cook Inlet, right up and along and on the east side of the western Alaska Range to about Denali Park, National Park. And then VFR, Copper River Basin into the Tanana Valley. Marginal VFR there for the upper Yukon Valley, Brooks Range, westward to the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, Kotzebue Sound, northwest coast, all of the Arctic coast, and marginal VFR for the southern Bering Sea, all of the Aleutians. And for passes, Anatuvik, IFR becoming marginal, IFR improving pretty good. VFR probably by possibly late morning through the afternoon. And again, IFR to start, but probably not improving, probably become marginal at best. Could go up VFR late in the day, but not as good as Anatuvik. Anyway, Lake Clark and Merrill starting out IFR early, becoming VFR for most of the day. That means a good portion of the morning hours as well. Same trend for Windy. You go marginal VFR to VFR. And for Isabel, IFR becoming marginal VFR. For Mentesta, marginal VFR. And Tanita, IFR becoming marginal. IFR to VFR for Tanita Pass. Let me see. Okay, Mentesta was just marginal at times throughout the day. And then Tanita, IFR to VFR. Portage, IFR start to finish. That's an easy one. And for Chilcoot and White, marginal VFR to start and VFR for about probably late morning through the afternoon. Freezing levels pushing northward there in the Bering Sea, 2,000 feet, halfway between St. Matthew, St. Lawrence Island at the surface, almost up to the Bering Strait, 6,000 feet over the Fox Islands, and 2,000 to 4,000 feet over the southern central panhandle. Icing, considerable moderate rime icing, northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, mostly out of the southeast coast, otherwise pretty well icing free for much of the state. And for the jet stream southwesterlies, 110 knots coming in toward the southwest coast, otherwise northwest, 90 knots over south central Alaska. Pretty strong winds with the Bering Sea storm coming in. You can see 70 to 85 knots, 3,000 feet. Long and ahead of the front, 60 to 70 knot winds, and northwesterlies on the coming down for the North Gulf Coast, Kodiak Island, high pressure over the interior. Turbulence-wise, with the system coming in, the front pushing into the western areas, considerable moderate turbulence from the northwest coast all the way down to Togiak Bay near Dillingham, the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, and far western Aleutians on the
When I first started working here in the early 90s, this is where the glacier was. I mean, where we're walking right now would have been a pile of gravel that had been pushed up by the glacier, and then we would have had 100 to 200 foot high cliffs of ice right here. And as you can see, that's changed quite a bit. And if you look at that in 2 dimensions, you can sort of see the terminus used to be here, now it's back there. That gives you one measure. What that kind of 2-dimensional look doesn't show is how much mass has been lost, that the glacier has just sort of deflated. These 200-foot cliffs of ice have disappeared and pulled back to this gentle sloping glacier you see now.
When I was working in Kenai Fjords National Park, I used the topographic maps to navigate where I was, and I realized that the mapping of the glaciers was really off. The glaciers had receded a lot. There were new rivers and lakes that were establishing where the ice used to be or should have been according to the maps. And so then I did a study on this and found out that we had a 5% loss of glacier ice mass in the Kenai Fjords area between 1950 and 1985. Big change.
You know, one of the most compelling things we do, though, to document glacier change is simply take photographs. We've had repeat photography projects here at the park. They may not give you the most accurate data in terms of how much mass or real specific measurements, but what they do give you is a visual representation that can't be argued with. I mean, it really requires no interpretation.
Understanding what's happening, understanding these processes, and possibly being able to predict what's going to happen in the future is the best that we can do, and that requires science and research.
There's considerable research on climate change in Alaska. The most significant, I would say right now, is the Natural Resources Inventory and Monitoring Program, which is looking at change across a wide variety of vital signs or indicators.
Kenai Fjords National Park is actually a pretty good representation of what's going on globally with regards to glacier ice retreat. There have been studies showing that mountain glaciers are retreating all over the planet. There are probably well over 90% of the glaciers are in retreat status. There are a few that are advancing, and some are holding their terminus point. But the Kenai Fjords The tidewater glaciers are retreating more dramatically, but even the land-based glaciers in the terminus positions are retreating. It's pretty common for all the mountain glaciers. The big mountain glaciers in Wrangell St. Elias National Park, they're mostly in retreat too. We're really entering an interesting phase where what we call the cryosphere, the ice on the planet, is melting.
You know, in the more immediate past, it's clear that since the Pleistocene, glaciers have been retreating. So the idea that glaciers retreat is nothing, is no revelation. They've been retreating from across North America for the last 10,000 years. What appears to have changed and what has people's attention is the rate at which they're retreating. In the case of Exit Glacier, you know, we have scientists who've been looking at it. We have evidence that the glaciers left behind, where we can track that retreat for about the last 200 years. And we can say with confidence that in the last decade, that rate has increased.
Terminus mapping is a great way to map a small portion of the ice field. We come out twice a year and we use a GPS to walk the edge of the terminus and map the farthest extent of Exit Glacier. And that allows us to see what type of changes are occurring over the winter accumulation period and the summer ablation period. With that data, that can help us as we witness these changes within the ice field, we can hopefully be able to correlate that with the weather data that we have.
You know, when you look at an ice field that's 750 square miles, when you look at a glacier that towers hundreds of feet high, you get a sense of permanence. You think these things are massive, they're somehow a permanent sort of feature, and yet in a very short period of time, in a matter of a couple of decades, we've seen dramatic change in those things.
At Exit Glacier, we have a time-lapse camera set up on the glacier that allows us to take a couple of photos every single day, and then to put that sequence of photos into a video where we can see changes of the glacier and the vegetation phenology throughout an entire year.
Virtually all the glaciers in Alaska are receding. Some glaciers are moving forward. That's not an indication that they're actually growing in size. It's just the rate at which they're slipping down the mountain.
In some cases, some of these glaciers are receding back up onto land, and so they're producing less ice. When you change a glacier system, you're changing habitat for marine mammals and other wildlife. And the populations of harbor seals have dropped dramatically in the fjords. In 1980, shortly after the establishment of the park, in Island Bay, we had maybe 1,500 harbor seals. Nowadays, you know, it's a few hundred.
In Arctic environments, much of the sunlight that reaches the Earth bounces back because it hits snow and reflects off into space, or ice on the ocean and reflects off into space. That's the albedo effect. When the snow thaws and instead you have rock or vegetation, or when the ice thaws and you have transparent ocean, the sunlight will convert to other wavelengths. It'll convert essentially to warmth. That does not bounce back into the atmosphere as much. So consequently, you get a warming of the ocean, you get a warming of the ground, you get a thawing of frozen soils or permafrost, you get a more rapid thawing of sea ice. So once the ice and once the snow is off of the surface, the rate of warming increases considerably.
If you're driving out to Exit Glacier, you'll actually start to see signs along the side of the road that have dates on them. Visitors sometimes are confused. They think they're elevations or something until they get up to the glacier and realize, oh, those were all date signs along the road that were telling me when the glacier was there. Another thing that's been happening in the Exit Glacier area in recent years is this flooding that comes at a time we're not used to. We're used to having maybe some flooding in the fall when we have a lot of heavy rain. This has suddenly been some flooding that's coming in the middle of the summer, usually not associated with precipitation events. It's associated with warmer weather and melting. When you walk down one of our trails that leads to Exit Glacier, there are a number of ways to get out there, but what used to be the main route is no longer really the main route because of the way the glacier has changed. So this main route to the glacier used to provide dramatic views of the glacier as you walk towards it. In fact, there was a large kiosk built at the end of this trail for people to stop and rest and enjoy the view of the glacier. Now, if they stop and rest at this kiosk, people think, why did the park put a kiosk here? Because it looks out at some shrubs. And there's no glacier within view anymore.
The way we solve big problems like this is not all at once. There's a thing called the Sokolov's wedges, and you just take a little bite of the pie, one sliver at a time. So we try to do incremental changes.
When we talk to people about our concerns about climate change, about the changes that are happening to the glacier, we also want to leave them with some idea of what we're doing to mitigate some of the effects of climate change. For example, here at the park, as we retire vehicles out of our fleet, we try to replace them with electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. We've done things like at the Glacier Nature Center, helping to sort of experiment and install a cutting-edge fuel cell, as opposed to running some traditional power source out there that relies on some sort of more greenhouse-producing gas.
My main hope for the future is that people get the message that the planet is changing fairly rapidly in places, particularly places like Kenai Fjords National Park, and that it is, we think, there's good evidence it's a result of atmospheric changes, which are measured in terms of human inputs into the atmosphere.
The rapid rate at which these glaciers are changing now offers us the opportunity to talk about this place as a way of looking into the future. In a lot of parts of the country, climate change issues are a little more subtle, and we can point here and say, look how fast this is changing. This is what the future holds for perhaps a lot of us and a lot of the planet as climate continues to change.
I'm optimistic that people and nature will adapt to change, but my expectation is that change will occur. Time will tell.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at marine forecasts here, we've got west to northwest winds 35 knots on the south coast of the Panhandle, west northwest 25 to 30 knots on the north coast. So gales on the south coast, small craft advisories on the north coast, with seas 20 feet the entire stretch of the coastline. Southeast 20 knot winds for the central and southern inside waters. Small craft advisories Lynn Canal. Warmer southerly winds at 25 knots with seas of 5 feet. Moving on to Tuesday, those winds swing around to the north. Colder north winds sustained at 25 knots with gusts to 40 knots for Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage. Small craft advisories, north winds 25 knots, seas 5 feet, and northwest at 15 for Clarence Strait. And the south coast, north winds 20 to 25 knots with seas 15 to 16 feet, and then northeast winds at 15 with 10 to 13 foot seas on the north coast. Prince William Sound. For tomorrow, Monday, look for pretty brisk northwest winds. There are some higher gusts out of northern bays, seas at about 6 feet. Gale force northwest winds for the eastern North Gulf Coast, 35 knots, seas up to 18 feet. Winds increase as you head west. We got full gales on the western North Gulf Coast out of the northwest of 40 knots, and storm warnings for the Barren Islands, northwest 50 knots, seas 21 feet. West winds 40 knots for Kamishak Bay, and seas at 10 feet. Southern Cook Inlet, west 25 knots. Northern Cook Inlet, much lighter on the winds at 10 knots with 3 foot seas. And then for Tuesday, northeast winds 10 to 15 knots for Cook Inlet, 3 to 4 foot seas, and winds out of the east to 20 knots in response to the falling pressures to the west with the next storm there for Kamishak Bay. Seas at 5 feet. Barren Island, small craft advisory, south 25 knots. North Gulf Coast, south winds at 15 knots with 8 to 9 foot seas. Prince William Sound, back to the light wind pattern there, at least for a day. East at 10, seas 2 feet. And for Kodiak Island, east side there, west 40 knots. Shelikof Strait, west 25 knots. And from Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev, southwest winds 25 to 30 knots. And gales out of the south on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, 35 knots, 25 knots southerlies for Bristol Bay. Outlook for Tuesday, southeast winds 45 knots there for the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, Cape Sarachev to Castle Cape, south winds 40 knots, 17 foot seas. Bristol Bay, southeast winds 35 knots. And Kodiak Island, south to southeasterlies at 25 knots, 7 to 9 foot seas. For the Fox Islands, Unalaska Island, south winds tomorrow 30 to 35 knots with 15 foot seas, and Unmak Island, southerlies 35 to 40 knots with seas to 17 feet. Even stronger winds in store for Adak and Atka, south to southwesterlies 45 knots, and then dropping back to 15 knots there for Amchitka Island, and then from Kiska to Shimianatu, southeast 25. Outlook for Tuesday, Western Aleutian, Shimia to Kiska, northwest 35 knots. That's good for gale warning. On Amchitka, southwesterlies at 50 knots and 45 to 50 knot winds for Adak and Atka. Storm warnings for most of the Aleutian, or most of the Fox Islands there. Southwest 50 knots for Unmak Island. South winds 45 to 50 knots on Alaska Island seas 18 to 23 feet. And for the gale warnings for the southwest coast tomorrow, 40 knots out of the south, 16-foot seas, about the same for St. Matthew Island, southerlies of 40 knots, 45 knots south wind sustained for the Pribilof, seas up to 23 feet, southeast 35 for St. Lawrence Island. Gale warnings also out for Norton Sound for southeast winds at 35 knots and seas up to 7 feet. Those will turn southerly for both St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound on Tuesday, seas 7 to 15 feet with winds at about 30 knots. Gales continue along the southwest coast, strongest south of Nunivak Island, where they'll be southeast at 45, southeast 30 for the Pribilofs, west 30 for St. Matthew Island with 15-foot seas. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, the far eastern area there, north at 20 tomorrow. Otherwise, brisk wind advisories for much of the eastern stretch of the coastline at 25 knots, and east 25 also for the central coast. Will be small craft advisories. And small craft advisories also for east winds at 25 from Point Lay down to Cape Thompson. Cape Thompson to Wales, gales are out, or gales will be flying out of the east at 35 knots. Those will turn south at 30 knots on Tuesday with southeast 30-knot winds, Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort. Otherwise, good gale force easterlies coming up for the good portion of the Arctic coast. They're east 40 knots, 10 to 11-foot seas, except in the ice-covered areas there, 30 to 40-knot easterlies. And for tonight, again, some light snow up over the north slope and snow continuing, widespread area of snow, but amounts will be diminishing throughout the night. And winter storm warnings will begin to end and definitely improving out west there. And the big storm rolls in on Tuesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.